didn't you just sprinkle flour all over the floor? Is that what you're asking? It's a very good question. And the reason that I did it is because that's what you kind of have to do to really show how to sweep the floor. If I was in person, it would be something different. You would be able to see it a little bit better. But since I'm not in person, because of the camera, the only way to actually teach somebody how to sweep the floor is by sprinkling something very visible on the floor. And that just happens to be flour today. Hey y'all, I'm Amy and welcome to A Lolly Life. There are two different kinds of sweeping the floor. There is the, I'm going to remove all of the chairs and pick up every shoe and do that kind of floor sweeping. And then there's the, I'm just gonna get the basics and I'm going to work around the table legs and chair legs and other things and just get as much of it as I can really quickly. Today we're going to do the full-on floor sweeping. When I pick up a rug, if I haven't swept the floor yet, a lot of times I'll just give it a little shake right here. If it's really dirty, then I'll take it outside to shake it, but you can just give it a little gentle shake right here and it'll clean up, it'll clear off some of the stuff in the rug. You need a broom and probably a dustpan, but if you don't have a dustpan, you could use like a piece of paper. Not bad. I think you actually could use a piece of paper. So you'll need a broom and a dustpan, and if you're really, really good at it, you might be able to use a piece of paper for a dustpan, but I wouldn't recommend it. To hold the broom correctly, you need to have two hands on the broom. One hand at the top and your dominant hand in the middle. And that means that if you're right-handed, your right hand would be in the middle of the broom. And when you are holding it, both hands are not faced the same direction. One of them is faced upwards and one hand is faced downwards. The one in the middle of the broom is faced down. And that gives you the leverage that you need to be able to sweep the floor efficiently. You have to lift it up, move it over. So you only sweep one direction. Start at one part and you work your way down to the other part. We have a galley kitchen, and so like it's kind of almost a hallway kitchen of sorts. And so I'm gonna start at the other end of the galley kitchen. Usually when you have a broom, you have one side that kind of flares out a little bit more than another. This side kind of flares out a little bit more. And so this helps you reach into little corners. And so like if you have a little corner, you can use that to kind of get the stuff out of the corners. In the corners, you really have to get in there and just like multiple tiny little swipes to get in there and just kind of dig out the stuff that might be in the corners. You drag your broom along the edges and push everything towards the middle of the room. And when you come across something like this, you can often kind of bend your broom and get underneath of it just a little so that you get some of the stuff that's right there. When you've just swept over it once, it doesn't always get all of it. Here are some of my trails. Those are trails of dust. You can only see that because I put the flour on the floor. But those trails of dust are because I didn't bother to sweep over it multiple times in any particular area. And so you have to sweep over the areas a couple of times. And you can do it quickly, but you can sweep over an area a couple of times. And really hard, fast sweep will send all the dust flying, and it will send it flying all the way across the room. And so you have to slowly sweep the bigger stuff, and then do some very quick, fast, short sweeps to get the dust that might have been left behind. And so it takes multiple passes on any given area to get all of the dust and stuff cleaned up. When you're sweeping it into a pile, you're sweeping it in a circle around the room, towards the middle of the room. And so you end up sweeping in this spiral shape as your pile gets smaller and smaller and smaller as you're sweeping it around the room. Once you've pushed all of your stuff towards one end of the room, and then you worked your way around the outside of the room, and you just keep pushing your pile towards the middle of the room. And the reason that you're gonna push the pile towards the middle of the room is because it's easier to clean up with the dustpan in the middle of the room than it is next to a wall. One important part of sweeping the floor is making sure that you actually clean up the pile that you swept up, because let's think about this. It's really kind of pointless to sweep it all up and leave it on the floor. Yeah, that's not a good idea. And so you have to actually get the dustpan and you have to actually sweep everything into the dustpan and deposit it in the dustbin or the garbage can or whatever you want to call it. I like to call it the rubbish bin. Take your dustpan, set it down on the edge of the pile over here, and take the broom, push the stuff into the dustpan. I usually will empty it if it's this full before I try and get the rest of it. And I sweep the stuff to the middle again. Put your dustpan again away from the pile, not at the very edge because you'll miss these little bits right here, but you just kind of put your dustpan down and give it a couple sweeps. This is a big no-no. You do not leave a line of dirt on the floor. You have to go back and sweep that area again. Do you know what this is? This is just a little rock. But it is also something that helps sweep the floor. If you have a child that isn't particularly good at sweeping the floor and you don't have flour on the floor, so it's really easy to see where you've swept and where you haven't swept and where your pile is, then this is something that you can use to help them know how to sweep the floor better. So you take the rock and you set it on the floor, and then as they sweep everything towards the rock. And that allows them to figure out where their pile is, even when it's a little bit harder to see because they don't necessarily have, say, flour on the floor. They can still sweep everything towards the rock. And then when they're done, then they pick the rock up and they wash it off and they throw the other stuff away. Another thing that's important when you're finishing up is actually putting the broom and dustpan away. And putting the chairs and the rugs back and everything else that you happen to pick up when you are getting ready to sweep. Ta-da! All of the chairs and rugs are back.